Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Jessica Freedman from Med Edits Medical Admissions. I'm happy to see, I will be happy to see everybody here. As you arrive, if you can please just let me know that you are in the room, and I will go ahead and I will start answering questions. Okay. I am going to go ahead and take a look at our Facebook group and start answering those questions. But first, just to introduce myself, my name is Dr. Jessica Freedman. I am the chair and founder of Med Edits Medical Admissions, and we assist applicants who are applying to medical school, to residency, to fellowship, to BSMD programs, to early assurance programs. I have been working in medical school admissions for my entire career. I am an emergency physician, and I was on the admissions committees at both the medical school and the residency levels at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. I then founded Med Edits Medical Admissions in like 07, 08, and I have been working in admissions ever since. We have an amazing group of faculty, all of whom have medical school admissions experience. That's something that you won't find anywhere else. It is a criteria that we adhere to when we are very carefully selecting who we want working with our students. So let me go ahead. For those of you who don't know, who are not aware, we do have a Facebook group, a private Facebook group that you have to join, but everybody is welcome to join that Facebook group. And as a part of that Facebook group, I'm just going to navigate over there. So just give me a moment. As a part of that Facebook group, you can go ahead and you can ask questions ahead of time on the day of these lives. And I do my best to get through all of the questions as much as possible so that I can answer everyone's concerns, address everybody's concerns, since not everybody is able to attend these lives. And so that's why I just like to make sure that, that we are able to answer everyone's questions. Okay, hold on 1 minute. Okay, so Yas asks, SUNY Upstate BSMD program was canceled from many institutions. My son had applied through the University of Albany. Any idea on how to find out if he needs to reapply through another institution? What I would recommend you do, Yas, is that you call Albany Medical College directly and you ask them if your son needs to apply through a different undergraduate college. We are finding that many of the BSMD programs are going through rapid changes, somewhat unexpected. This one I did not know about, that there were some shifts. So it's always best to go right to the source. So I would recommend calling Albany, asking them specifically, my son is interested in this program. What undergraduate institution does he need to apply to in order to be considered for the program? Okay, Justin asks, if you are applying to medical school as a biology major, is it important to have a stated concentration within biology to graduate with honors? So Justin, that is not really so important. What is more important is how your student is performing in their undergraduate classes. What is the level of rigor within those classes? And if, because they are so outstanding that they end up graduating with honors, Phi Beta Kappa, whatever other honor they're graduating with, that's terrific. The medical schools, of course, look at those honors, but what they're looking at more concretely is the actual GPA, and the GPA is broken up into the biochem math GPA, the all other GPA, and the total GPA. In terms of research, if you need to have if you're talking about a stated concentration within a major, that implies a real focus within that major which also implies to me that they're doing research within that kind of niche, within that focus. And we certainly do recommend that students have a niche interest in whatever, whatever their research interest is. So again, if those things kind of align, that the student's research interest also happens to be something that they're studying at school so that they can then graduate with honors, wonderful. But if their research interest ends up being something that is outside of their major or is outside of the school, that's okay as well. What's key is to sort of have that niche interest, to have that well developed interest in something. If that's not something that's happening within the undergraduate college, that's okay. So when it comes to honors and things, focus less on the actual honors and sort of more in terms of what is the academic performance, how does that look, and what is the actual impact within that area of interest, within that research domain. How many hours, how many volunteer hours are needed for med school? We don't like to focus on absolute numbers of hours that you need. We really discourage students from collecting hours to become competitive applicants. What is important is to have a focus and to really demonstrate that focus by, yes, having a lot of hours dedicated to whatever that focus is, but doing so in a really authentic and dedicated way, so it doesn't look like you are collecting. Is it necessary to have some level of community service, social justice, advocacy work? Absolutely. Does that have to kind of be the pillar of your candidacy and of your application? Not necessarily. For some students, it will be, but not for everybody. So again, this is really about kind of finding what are your real interests and exploring those interests as deeply as you possibly can. So I would say that most of our students have a minimum of 50 hours of some level of volunteer community service advocacy type of work, but the ones where that's really their niche, they have 1,000+ hours. So there's a huge variation. And again, when we're reviewing applications, when we're looking at candidacies, making recommendations, we're looking at what the students' interests are, and then we're kind of making recommendations on where they should really dive, what they should really be diving into when it comes to those interests. Okay. Do most medical schools require 2 semesters of math in undergraduate? If so, can my daughter take 1 calculus and 1 biostats, or does it have to be 2 calculus? So Shirley, absolutely. If your daughter wants to take a semester of calc and 1 semester of biostats, medical schools love to see stats and biostats. Many students are placing out of calculus using AP credit as undergraduates, and that's okay as long as they are getting some math in college. Some students don't place out of calculus because it's an easy way to get an A and it's an easy way to potentially start their undergraduate career. But some medical schools are going to require 1 semester of math. Some are going to require 2 semesters of math. And there's some medical schools that don't require any math. But because there are a large percentage of medical schools that do want to see math, we do recommend that students take it. Okay, let me just go ahead here to the main board. Hi, Yas, how are you? Nice to see you. Okay, let me go ahead and take a look. Hold on, I'm just sort of scanning our questions. Okay, so Mohammed asks about the Ochsner Medical School program, which is in Australia. And Ochsner's actually, we have seen some pretty good residency results from Ochsner students, in fact. So if you are considering going offshore for medical school, leaving the United States for medical school, I do think that Ochsner is actually a decent option, in fact. Okay. All right, hold on. I'm going to go back to the Facebook page. 1 second. Okay. So let me go ahead and answer this person's question. So I have a family member who attended an online brick and mortar school and completed a liberal arts degree, working on prerequisites for medical school. Are there any concerns for med school? Med schools, I don't know of any medical schools that are going to accept an online undergraduate degree. Medical schools want you to have an actual college degree. They will not accept an online degree. Now, if you're at a college and a course is offered online, that's a different story if it's part of that undergraduate degree. But we recommend getting an undergraduate degree from from a 4-year undergraduate college that is not an online degree. Absolutely. If you want to see the specific medical school requirements for each medical school to see if there are any medical schools that will accept an online degree, I recommend that you take a look at the MSAR, the medical school admissions requirements, and you can Google that and sign up for that. But I am not aware of any medical schools that are going to accept an online degree. So I'd be very, very careful about that. Okay. Sadi asks, what is the best MCAT prep? When we are recommending MCAT prep for our students, our general advice is to consider what worked best for the student when they were studying for other standardized exams. So for some students, for example, they might be really great self-studiers. Other students do very, very well in a course and they really need that structure. They need that accountability. And that sort of, schedule of reviewing content is very, very helpful. When we are recommending courses, we recommend that students go with the most popular course, the course that's been around for a long time and is a proven entity. Students like Kaplan and Princeton Review equally. I don't, have a real preference for one versus the other. And you want to incorporate, and the courses will do this, you want to incorporate practice tests into your preparation using the AAMC, the Association of American Medical Colleges tests, fairly carefully because there are a limited number of them. And then we find that some students, after they've either self-prepared on their own, many students are able to just, get a suite of Kaplan books and they're able to use those resources and you take practice tests on their own and they prepare very well and they do very well just by, doing this all independently. And then what some students will then do is they may get a tutor in areas where, let's say, they need some improvement or, where they're maybe having a little bit of difficulty. So we find that is sort of the general pattern that works the best for most students. But of course, this is very, very individualized. There are some students who use tutoring the whole way through. I think that's a little bit excessive. And honestly, I think there's so much sort of groundwork that needs to be done by the student that I don't really advocate for using a tutor the entire way through the process. I recommend that kind of more at the end of the process. Okay. So someone asked, Teresa asked, what about the Caribbean? I am hearing a lot about it. So Caribbean medical schools, there are many Caribbean medical schools. The big 3 medical schools, as we think of them, are St. George's, Ross, and AUC. If you had asked me 10 to 15 years ago about Caribbean medical education, I would have told you it was a great option, that graduates of Caribbean medical schools do very well, that they get, great residency placements here in the United States. I would say over the past 5 years or so, we are not advocating for Caribbean medical education as much as we used to. We find that many Caribbean medical schools are accepting students who clearly, based on their undergraduate performance, based on their MCAT performance, are unlikely to succeed in medical school. And they potentially never even make it to their 3rd-year clinical clerkships here in the United States because Caribbean medical schools make you pass the USMLE based on a mock test before you're even allowed to sit for the USMLE, which is what allows you to enter your 3rd-year clinical clerkships. We also are finding that more and more Caribbean medical schools are, sort of spreading their students out across the country for their clinical rotations. So logistically, that makes things complicated. And we find that it's difficult. it's getting more difficult for Caribbean medical students to gain the residencies they want in the United States. So you certainly can be successful by going to a Caribbean medical school. It is challenging, both in terms of being on the island for 2 years, and then coming to this country to do your clinical rotations. So I just think that if that's an option you're considering, you need to go into it with open eyes. You need to understand what those challenges are going to be, and you really need to make sure that you are objectively competitive to be able to go into the field of medicine, just based on your past academic performance. Okay. Just scanning through our questions today. Yes, I answered the question about the SUNY BSMD program earlier, so you can watch the video when you have a chance. Okay. So Josana asks, is study abroad research programs, are they beneficial when the student already has research course in the existing university? So Jaya, it depends. Certainly we have had students who have done research abroad. They have had, research experiences that they have done internationally, and those are very valuable. Again, I wouldn't sort of, kind of say, is it better to do it in the US or is it better to do it abroad? It's a question of what is the experience going to be? What is your role going to be? What is your contribution going to be? How does that experience relate to your area of interest? How does it build on your area of interest? And what is the potential for success as a part of that experience? So it's very, very hard to say definitively, yeah, having a research experience abroad is going to be a great opportunity for you, and a better opportunity potentially than what you might have here in the US. We would have to consider what all of the potential opportunities are going to be for that student, and then we can, help the student to determine what is the best option. Okay. Pankaj asked Dr. Jessica questions. Number one, till when can we expect interviews coming in for this cycle for medical school admissions? This is a great question. We see students getting medical school interviews literally all the way into March. Now, when you're interviewing in March, you really are interviewing for a place on the wait list. Not necessarily a terrible thing. We had one student last year who I believe had 2 March interviews, was a late applicant, and ended up getting accepted. So just because you're placed on a wait list and you have a late interview does not mean that you're not getting in. But from this point forward, the medical school interviews are going to be trickling in. They tend to kind of come all at once at the beginning of the cycle, and from this point on, they're going to trickle. So this is a tough part of the cycle for students, because maybe they got a couple interviews at the beginning, and now, things have kind of slowed down a bit, but a lot is going to happen between now and March. So just be patient. Yeah, I'd heard Thanksgiving is, there are going to be many interview invitations that are happening after Thanksgiving. So I would not consider Thanksgiving the benchmark. If you reach Thanksgiving and you're still hoping for more interviews, they may be coming. So I wouldn't stress about that. How many average interviews would give you a good shot at getting at least one confirmed admissions offer? There is data on this, and the average number of interviews is 3 for somebody who gets accepted to medical school. We certainly have students who get 1 interview at a school that they're really aiming for, and they get accepted to that 1 medical school. So, having even just 1 interview can most definitely lead to success in the process. So that's a great question. Okay, I'm just going to go back to our Facebook group and see what other questions are here. Okay, just scrolling through. All right. Tag asks, after an interview, a medical school interview, how long does it usually take to get an answer? A month? More than a month? It depends on the school. There are some, and it depends on when you're interviewing in their cycle. So, and it depends also if your interviewer is timely in filling out their evaluation sheets, if they are attending the committee meeting that week. There are many, many variables that, that influence this process. So I would say the average time to receiving an answer after an interview is going to be anywhere from 6 weeks to 2 months. Keep in mind, there are a large number of medical schools. They tend to be the most competitive medical schools that are releasing all of their decisions at once in March. So there's huge, huge variation in this. And, there are other medical schools who may say, yes, we started interviewing in September, but we're not releasing any decisions until after Thanksgiving. So many of the schools are going to give the students an idea of when they can expect to hear when they actually interview. If it's been longer than what you anticipated or expected based on what you were told, it's perfectly okay to call the medical school, explain to them, I interviewed on such and such a date. I was just wondering when I'm going to know the decision that's been made. Perfectly okay to do that. Okay, let's see what other questions are here. If anyone is having trouble accessing the live, just let me know. You should be able to, we're now doing all of the lives through a service called StreamYard so that we can stream onto all of our different outlets, YouTube and both of our Facebook pages. So if you're having any trouble, it's possible that you may need to register for StreamYard on the Facebook page. So if you're having trouble with that, just let us know, or you can also email us. We would love to hear from you if you're having difficulty, so we can, figure out what you need to do. info@mededits.com. Okay, so Tina asks more about lures and documenting work experience. Should a freshman student ask for a lure after concluding the work experience so 3 years later he doesn't need to look for the supervisor? Do they keep the letters, or will the school want it directly from the supervisor? So Tina, first of all, in terms of requesting letters of recommendation, oftentimes the schools will hold those letters of recommendation. This is something that you want to ask your undergraduate pre-med advising office. Are they going to hold your letters of recommendation when you request them? If not, then you have to sign up for a letter dossier service. The most common one is Interfolio, and the letter writers can upload their letters to your account there. And then when you actually apply to medical school, you can then submit those letters to the application service or directly to the medical schools, depending on the system you're applying through. Now, in terms of which letters of recommendation you want to be asking for, it is very, very rare to ask for a letter of recommendation from your freshman year. Most of the letters of recommendation are going to be coming from experiences you had the year of admission. So if you're applying, let's say in May, everything that happened that academic year, and then everything from the academic year prior. So the only time that I can think of a situation where a student had somebody write a letter from their freshman year is if that relationship continued throughout most of their undergraduate experience. So if it was a work experience, this is someone they potentially worked with throughout their undergraduate experience. Or if it's a research principal investigator, this is someone that they did research with throughout their entire undergraduate experience. Otherwise, it's very, very rare to get a freshman year letter, especially for a short-term experience. Okay, so Vali asks, do medical schools require more research hours or clinical hours? Again, it usually isn't one or the other. Most students are going to excel in one area. Some students are going to excel in two areas. So I can tell you that the majority of our students are going to have many, many hours, and that means 1,000 or more hours in either clinical experience or research. Most of them are not going to have more than 1,000 hours in both of those buckets, as I call them. Now, our most competitive students, I can tell you, they do have potentially 1,000+ hours in both clinical experience and in research experience. Now, in terms of if you want to be choosing, okay, where should I be devoting most of my time? Number one, you have to look at your own interests. You don't want to be doing something that's torture to you and you don't really enjoy it. And number two, you want to be thinking about what are your ultimate goals? Where do you ideally want to go to medical school? If you want to go to a research focused school where 99% or more of applicants have research experience, those who get into the medical school, then you probably want to be devoting a lot of your time to your research experience. If you want to go to a school, every medical school has some kind of research focus, which is why we do recommend that every applicant have some research experience. But let's say you want to go to a medical school where there's not such an emphasis on research experience, then you might want to be devoting more of your time, relatively speaking, to clinical experience instead of research experience. Every medical school wants research and every medical school prefers that you have some clinical experience. So it's a question of where you are committing most of your time and where you're putting most of your energy and your efforts. Okay. Okay, Sajana asks, will EMT job be considered a good clinical experience? EMT is a great clinical experience. Many of our students do EMT work. It is one of the only ways that a student can get clinical experience as an undergraduate. Many of the undergraduate colleges have their own EMS squads. It's a fabulous way to get hands-on clinical experience, to understand pre-hospital care, to understand even emergency department operations, because you're potentially arriving at the emergency departments. And we definitely recommend that our students, when they get onto campus, they find out about those EMS services, or they work as an EMT, even potentially, off campus as undergraduates. This is a fabulous way to get clinical experience. Okay. Okay, so John asks, are there any awards for the students that contribute a lot for clinical experience volunteering? I wouldn't sort of go award hunting. If you're talking about, a very well recognized national award, that might be something to strive for, but it's very, very different than college admissions. I know that for college admissions, definitely students are sort of like searching for different awards and prizes that they can put on their application in the honors and awards section. Med school is different. They're really looking at what your contributions are. They're looking at what you've learned from those experiences and how much time you've committed to those experiences. So I wouldn't be focused so much on getting awards for medical school. Okay, so Monica asks, do letters of recommendation need to be written in the same year as you are applying? So Monica, no, letters of recommendation do not need to be written in the same year you are applying. Many students are going to be getting letters of recommendation from the year before they applied to medical school. So for example, let's say you're applying at the end of your senior year of college. Most students are going to have letters of recommendation from people that they've worked with, or professors who have taught them in their senior year of college, but they're also going to have letters of recommendation from people who taught them or people that they worked with during their junior year of college, or potentially in the summer between junior and senior year. Okay. So Rika asks, how bad is it to take medical leave of absence for 1 quarter in your senior year? Rika, people get sick. Things happen. The medical schools will want to know what happened. So the only time where this potentially can be a bit of a red flag is if it's a mental health issue. Medical schools, admissions committees in general at any level, I think, are a little bit wary of potential leaves of absence due to mental health issues. But certainly, if there's a surgical emergency, or something happens, maybe
Talia Katsky,
sorry,
FaceTime video.
Perhaps it's an infectious disease type of issue. So if there needs to be, if there's a real reason that a student needs to take a leave of absence, absolutely, that's perfectly okay. Okay. All right. Pankaj asks, okay, sorry. My daughter is out of state for California medical school. She had her UCLA interview, but no word for others. She applied to UCSF so far, UCI, etc. Guessing it is a game of patience now. Yes, it is definitely a game of patience. If your daughter had an interview already for UCLA and she's from out of state, that's really impressive. And yeah, I, as of yet, none of our students yet have heard back from UCLA. So I don't know that those decisions have been released. If anyone else has more information about that, feel free to let us know that in the chat. But I haven't heard yet of California schools releasing decisions. I'm almost positive. I'd be curious to know what state she is from, but clearly if she got an out-of-state UCLA interview, she must be an outstanding applicant. And that's really impressive. And I would anticipate, just based on that single data point, that there are more interviews on the way. And I just hope that she applied to a good range of schools, which would help to guarantee that. Okay, I think that we've answered all of our questions tonight. So if you don't have any more questions, if you do, just please post them, and I'm happy to answer them. But this was a great batch of questions. Let me just look on our page and just see. Okay, there are a couple questions here from our page. So Mariko asks, how do students get hospital volunteer jobs? At my son's school, it seems extremely competitive, and it's hard to get one after MM-style interviews just for the volunteer job. Wow, I have not heard of an MMI, multiple mini interview, for a volunteer job at a hospital. Mariko, if you could let us know where that is and what school this is. Usually the hospital volunteering jobs are going to be a little more competitive if your child goes to school in a smaller area where it's, there isn't such, maybe they're not in an urban area where there are multiple hospitals. So it's possible that maybe he goes to school in an area where there's just one main hospital. So there's a lot of competition between the pre-meds. Certainly if there is, a formal interview, especially if it's MMI style, I would encourage that he practice a little bit for that. But the best way to get some volunteer experience is then to go outside of the school, reach out potentially directly to hospitals, directly to doctors' offices, clinics, any medical establishment that's local to him, to try and get that experience directly. I don't think they're really, for just hospital volunteering that doesn't require any clinical expertise, there really aren't any skills or certificates that are needed. It also is possible. And what some of our students do is they do become certified to be certified nursing assistants or medical assistants. And then they actually work, as an undergraduate, they'll be working at a hospital or at an office, while they're, going to school. Definitely a challenge, but people do it. So that might be something to consider. And you also ask, could he potentially volunteer at a nursing home? Absolutely. Volunteering in nursing home, hospice, anywhere where you're going to come in direct contact with patients, with people who have backgrounds that are different than your own, and where you're going to learn something, and you're going to be engaged in medical care is a very valuable experience. Okay, let me see if there are any more questions. This is a good question. Is volunteering in the nutrition and dining area in a hospital considered clinical? It's not considered clinical. Clinical is when you literally are touching patients, hands-on clinical experience where you're directly interacting with the patient. But I do think that that's unusual, frankly, to be volunteering in a nutrition dining area, depending on what the student's responsibilities are in that position. That could be a really interesting experience. That's also a bit unusual. My son attended an early, hold on. Okay, Sujana asks, my son attended an early college program instead of 11th and 12th grade of high school. He got a few B's in his first year as he is adjusting to college honors courses. I am worried medical colleges will not realize that it's an early college and treat this negatively. So if I'm understanding this correctly, he, instead of high school, he's in his first and second years of college. So he's somebody who potentially could be applying what really would he be applying at the end of his sophomore year, I guess, but that would actually be his senior year. This is something that would need to be explained very, very carefully in his application. I would probably also encourage him, assuming that he's going to be done with college in the next 4 years, and he's going to be very young, that he takes some time to work and to gain some maturity and some other experiences. He certainly will have the luxury of being able to do that. And I would not worry about a few B's in his first year. Many students have B's. We even just worked with a student who's already been accepted to med school. Granted, this person did special masters as well, did some graduate work, but literally had C's and D's as an undergraduate. Incredibly, incredibly bright and hardworking student who then, kind of proved that they were capable of the work and just, didn't have such an easy experience early in undergraduate college. So there are always things that we can recommend for a student to do to potentially make up for a subpar academic performance as an undergraduate. But I do not worry about a few B's. It's totally okay. Even a C, a withdrawal, all of these things, assuming that they're not patterns, and that there's an upward trend and there's progression, especially with a more rigorous curriculum. That's something that certainly is, we can undo and is forgivable. And remember that the MCAT is an apples to apples comparison. So doing well on the MCAT is also, this is why it's so important for everybody. Yeah. So Sujan, if he's going to apply after his sophomore year of college, I would certainly recommend that he do something else as well, because he's going to be very young, and, certainly that's possible. We've worked with students who get into medical school and they're very young, but I just think that could be a more enjoyable process for him if he's not the youngest in his medical school class, especially because more and more students are taking at least one gap year before going to medical school. So I think there's potentially going to be a huge age gap for him in the medical school class. And also just because during interviews, we want to make sure that he has the maturity, to be able to do well on his interviews, because he's going to be interviewing, essentially alongside people who are, significantly older than he is relative to their level of experience. Okay, so that was a great session. I am so happy everyone attended. Again, if you had, there's just one more question, so let me go ahead and answer this. Okay, my son is in his second year of college and he's only spent about 30 hours shadowing a doctor. He hasn't done any other research or clinical activities yet, and I'm worried he might be falling behind. Can you give me some advice on how he can catch up? Also, can you offer guidance on how to get involved in research? Okay, so remember, most students are not getting everything as undergraduates. It is very hard to get clinical experience, to get shadowing experience, to get research as an undergraduate in 4 years. And many students don't do this. This is why a lot of students are going to be taking at least one gap year. For someone who's in their sophomore year of college already, and all they've done on the pre-med sort of non-academic curriculum, so to speak, is, to get 30 hours of shadowing, this is someone who is definitely going to want to take at least a single gap year, perhaps 2 gap years. Research is generally something that the student can get by either going directly to the departments at their college, potentially what they're majoring in, going directly to labs to see what experiences exist, or go to surrounding labs, hospitals, find out if there are any opportunities for research positions, go to the career office at their undergraduate college, go to the pre-med office, use all of the opportunities and all of the resources that the student has locally on their own campus first, before then branching out. Okay, one more question. Nareet asks, how do medical schools view a withdrawal in a core class versus a C, for example? It's tough to say. I would say that those are viewed somewhat equally. If the student retakes a class, then the grade appears for both the withdrawal and the class when they retook it. So again, assuming this is a prerequisite, assuming it's a reader class, um, I might just take the C, honestly, especially if they're early on in college. If they withdraw from the class and then they retake, I might advise that they retake the class at a different college, perhaps over the summer. So I'd say it's pretty, those two things are going to be pretty comparable, especially if this is a prerequisite class where they have to take the class. If it's a class where, let's say, it's not a prerequisite, it's not something that they have to have for medical school, then I don't think it matters. I think then I think the withdrawal would be fine. But I'm kind of on the fence of which is better or worse if it's a prerequisite course that they have to take. Okay, one more question. Any advice and resources that can review his essay and provide recommendations? Is this how, do you do this? I think is what you're asking, Sujana. This is what we do all the time. Yeah, we take great pride in the work that we do. Our students work very hard. But yes, absolutely, that's something we can do. If you're interested, please sign up for a free 15-minute consultation, or you can email us info@mededits.com. We'd be happy to provide information to you. All right, there are a lot of questions. I'm just going to keep answering until we, and I don't know, maybe at 8:45 I'll stop. Okay, Pankaj, I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name, asks, do med schools take age into consideration for final offers post-interview, especially children without gap years? No, they really don't take that into consideration. And in fact, our students who don't take gap years, they tend to be really focused, driven students who excel. And, so it's kind of interesting. The students who do take gap years, I find, do very well in the process for that reason, because most people are taking gap years at this point. And I think the students that don't take gap years, those are students who entered college day one, knowing this is what they wanted, just excelled in everything and were able to get it all done. So what is more of a consideration is not the absolute age, but it's just the level of maturity and how they present on an interview. I'd say that's the only time age can sort of count against somebody, but it's not, kind of the absolute age that's counting against them. It's the maturity factor that's counting against them. Okay, some Facebook user asks, who are the people who are part of the interview committee? Great question. Huge mix. And it depends on the medical school. Some medical schools are only going to have faculty who are actually at the medical school, both physicians and PhDs, but also administrators, people who don't have any medical experience. This is why it's really important to understand that all of your materials need to be able to be understood by everybody, because it isn't only MDs and PhDs who are involved in this process. Then there are some bigger medical schools who may call on their adjunct faculty, people who work in the community who aren't really part of the academic setting, who are doing those interviews and who are reviewing those applications. Some schools also have medical students who are reviewing applications and doing interviews. So there's really a tremendous variation in terms of who is a part of this process and who has the most influence on the process. There are some medical schools where the director of admissions, a non-MD, is doing a large amount of the review, a large amount of the interviewing, and they're really making some really key decisions. Whereas at other medical schools, the director of admissions, a non-MD, is really kind of answering emails and doing more administrative types of tasks. So there's huge variation. Okay, one more question. With regards to research, can it be in anything or medically related? Research can really be in anything. I still would prefer, I mean, if you're an art history major and you want to do, art history research, or you're linguistics, you want to do linguistics research, that's okay. And certainly what you're going to learn through doing any type of research is going to be applicable to research and inquiry, and critically evaluating the literature and analyzing data and all those things that researchers do. I still think it's better to ideally have research in something that is scientifically affiliated, whether that's basic science research, whether that's public health research, whether that's clinical research, clinical trials. I think it's still sort of better to have something that's within the realm of what's important to the practice of medicine. Even potentially advocacy research, something of that nature, which is becoming more and more important to medical schools as time goes on. You can get a little creative. Technically, medical schools will value research in literally any discipline, but I prefer that it be something that's related to medicine, or something that you will be seeing or doing as a future physician. So this was a great session tonight, and I thank you all for being here. Again, if there were any technical problems on anybody's end, if you could just please let us know, that would be a huge help. And I hope to see everybody next week. I cannot believe it's November. And let me just give a shout out to all of our students who are doing so unbelievably well in the process this year. Fabulous interviews, amazing acceptances, and we're just all super duper proud of them. So I hope to see you all next Thursday night. And thank you again for all the terrific questions. It was great to see everybody here. Bye-bye.